Welcome to episode 47 of A Plain Account, where every week we select one of the lectionary passages and discuss it with a guest. Today, Danny Quanstrom is in Chicago with family for the holiday, so we just want to wish them a merry time together. And that family time is so rare for pastors, so we are thankful that he's able to do that today. Today I'm joined with Pastor Chris Reiter. He's a close friend of mine, and if you haven't yet, he wrote the commentary for this week's Old Testament passage, Isaiah 60, 1 through 6. Chris, would you introduce yourself to our audience today?
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Ben, for having me on here. I feel a little over my head, but that's okay. We'll see what we can do to work through some of this. But yeah, my name is Chris Reiter. I'm recently lead pastor in Castle Rock, Colorado. The last 5 years, however, I have been church planting in Boise, Idaho, just next door to Ben, and that's where he and I really got acquainted and got to be friends, walking the trails there in the foothills in Boise, if you're familiar. Yeah, thanks for having me, Ben, and I hope we can open up this passage a little bit and find some imagination as to
I have no doubt that we will. I do miss those hikes in the foothills. We were able to take the dogs out and have some really good time with God and each other. And Pastor's Retreat isn't the same without you and Cherie. So so thankful for what God's doing with you in your new assignment.
Thanks.
Well, let me read this passage for us. It's Isaiah 60, 1 through 6, and I'm going to read it from the Common English Bible. I favor the Common English in preaching. It seems to be both accessible and really open for the pastor to work with some of these words. So let me read this passage, and we'll jump into and start talking about what it has to say for us.
Sounds good.
Isaiah 60, 1 through 6. Arise, shine, your light has come. The Lord's glory has shone upon you. Through darkness, though darkness covers the earth and gloom the nations, the Lord will shine upon you. God's glory will appear over you. Nations will come to your light, and kings to your dawning radiance. Lift up your eyes and look all around. They are all gathered. They have come to you. Your sons will come from far away, and your daughters on caravanners' hips. Then you will see and be radiant. Your heart will tremble and open wide, because the sea's abundance will be turned over to you. The nation's wealth will come to you. Countless camels will cover your land, young camels from Midian and Ephah. They will all come from Sheba, carrying gold and incense, proclaiming the Lord's praises. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Be to God. So we've just moved from Advent into Christmas last Sunday, proclaiming Christ's birth to the world, and we are continuing in this Christmas tide this coming Sunday. The gospel emphasizes the Magi coming to the light of Christ in the manger. And a big question for this Sunday is, what do we do when we're drawn to this light? And what sort of things happen when the light of the Lord infiltrates and inhabits God's people? And this passage from Isaiah really emphasizes that well. What sort of things, Chris, should we kind of know going into this passage for Sunday?
Yeah, I think part of what we should know is, for the last couple of weeks, I've been in Advent going through the Isaiah passages and understanding. I'm not quite certain of the historical landmark of chapter 60, but understanding the tensions that the Hebrew people were in, the Israelites were in during this time between either King Ahaz or Hezekiah, and kind of the tensions between being a people that are enslaved or enslaved, and then being a people that are free, and some of that tension between how Ahaz kind of leaned into, I think it was the Assyrians that he actually leaned into and kind of leaned his faith on rather than God. Whereas King Hezekiah came in and began to really lean in on faith in God and justice and mercy for his people. And so I think there's some tensions that are very similar going on here in this chapter, that they are to be a light. In other words, they are to live as Hezekiah was leading them, not as his father Ahaz was leading them. So leading the people as a light, as justice and mercy, and caring for the poor and the widow and all that stuff. So here we've got a people that are becoming the people of God, light to the world, which includes justice and mercy for the oppressed.
Amen. Yeah, I really like that contrast there, because in 59 we don't get such a bright passage as we do in 60.
Right.
59 is almost has in verses 3 through 7 and 12 through 13, we have a list of things that Israel is just participating in that is just so daunting. Let me read a couple of those descriptors there. Bloody hands, lies, wickedness, corrupt courts, violence, evil, oppression, and revolt. These things that are kind of laid against the nation from the prophet Isaiah are not good things to be a part of. And whether or not the king has led them into these practices, Isaiah doesn't seem to be so concerned with that as much as he is with their repentance from these things. Because then later on he lays out in 8 through 17 that they have ignored God's covenant, which brings peace, righteousness, justice, salvation, uprightness, and truth. And so Isaiah seems to be calling these people out of their darkness in chapter 59, and it doesn't seem to be just one particular group. Would you kind of say that it's the whole nation that is suffering, or at least participating in this darkness in a very real and intentional way?
Well, it seems as though, and it's a matter of following the leader, as I commented on my text commentary, that the leader kind of sets the tone. And so, there were probably pockets of righteousness within the Hebrew people, I imagine. But it seems as a general rule, the entire nation was living and operating in unjust kind of ways. As you were talking, Ben, I can think of, the prophet is often kind of this woolly character that seems to be pretty intense and maybe takes things too far, if you will. But it's interesting for me. I like to watch the Red Bull TV, and in so many different sports, we like to take things to the very end. Like, how far can we push this thing?
Right.
But often in our spiritual life, in our world, I'm careful to use that spiritual life because it should be all of our life when God is a part of it. It's interesting how we buffer it maybe a little bit. And so the prophet is pushing these people. The prophet, I feel like, is pushing these people to a far degree, saying, hey, righteousness is beyond the way, this simple, easy way of living. I mean, so let's push it to its end. How far can we push righteousness and justice, and how far to the end can we go?
I like that a lot.
And it kind of gets a little scary because we're pretty comfortable in our country and in our world, and we're pretty good. Aleppo is way across the world, and we break for it, and we we hurt for it, we lament for what's going on in the world, but we tend to be pretty comfortable with where we're at. So I wonder if maybe part of the prophet's language for us is to push us a little bit, to challenge us, maybe a little bit, maybe a lot. I'm not certain.
Yeah. Well, as you were speaking there, I mean, I can't help but think of every prophet suffered under Israel because of that encouragement and pushing and prodding. You know, they weren't oppressed and persecuted for saying cozy truths. You know,
Right.
And I don't think that's what should scare us so much, is that Israel persecuted the prophets. It was because Israel persecuted the prophets for saying such a plain truth, just like Jesus was saying. You know,
right.
When the plain truth pushes the boundaries, what does that say about the people that the truth is being spoken to?
Right.
Sure. Perhaps they're so far in the darkness, like you're saying, right, that a plain truth pushes the boundaries, that the call to be righteousness is so far beyond where they're at right now. Well, right. I mean, what does that have to say about their state of righteousness?
Right. Sure. Yeah, and I think along with that understanding where we say, oh, this state of righteousness is a well, I'm a good person, right? I haven't killed anybody. I haven't robbed a bank. I haven't, you know, on and on. So we even take that to the nth degree. You know, the sin and badness in life, we'll take that to the end. You know, I don't do the very worst of it.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily do the very best of it either. I don't work on this, but I'm right here in the middle. I'm a good person. I'm good, you know, and it's tough because being a good person is a good thing.
Sure.
It's good to not kill people and not steal, and you know, that's good, and that's in part righteousness.
Absolutely.
But how far do we take it, and how far does the prophet take us? How far does he want to move us? Because he doesn't necessarily chalk it out. He doesn't give us a list of, hey, this is what justice is. It means ... You know, it means you know, welcoming. Yeah. I'm careful who to put, but you can probably fill in the space.
Sure.
Welcome into our church,
right?
You know, whatever, and you can fill in those gaps.
Mm-hmm.
And the prophet doesn't really give us those kind of details,
right?
And so I think at some level we have to listen further than maybe the text itself as to what is righteousness, what is justice, what is mercy, who am I to have mercy for? Am I to have mercy for the least of the evils, or am I just to have mercy for all of? I don't know.
Yeah. Wow.
Too much.
Yeah. Well, as you're speaking there, you know, in our own culture, I think two of the biggest factors that we as pastors are confronted and challenged with is relativism. Everything kind of is relative to the individual. What their story is, that's kind of the authority in their life, and Jesus kind of becomes a condiment on the side of that, right? To make you have a whole culture that's built on this pursuit of happiness. But what happens when everybody's definition of good is different? Right. Because what might be good for me may not be good for someone else.
Right.
So how do we function within that? And then number two, this sort of pluralism, that we have this vast array of information in front of us. So we can just kind of pick and choose from this buffet of truths in front of us to then make up my own individual story, right? And so all of it is not, it's kind of self-determined, this truth, this goodness, this righteousness. Well, I'm a good person. Well, you know, the pastor could say, well, what is your definition of good? And does it align with what perhaps the prophet is calling us to? Because I think Isaiah would say, you know, you are operating under your definition of comfort and good and righteousness here.
Right.
But I found myself asking as I read these 2 chapters, how are we to invite the light of the Lord in? What is our participation with that? And I think the first step is surrender. We surrender. We confess the sins. We confess this desire to control reality, to control the outcomes, because that leads to oppression of the least of these, like you were saying.
Right. So we can either be the innkeeper that says, hey, there's no room.
Right.
There's no room in the inn, because you're a young woman that's clearly a little shaky because you have a son we don't know who the dad is.
Right. Right.
We don't have room for you, or we can indeed have room, and that's a difficult thing because we have our standards.
Absolutely.
And so who do we have room for? And hopefully we grow in our awareness of God, our sensitivity to God's Spirit, that we don't miss it. And I think in part that's where the prophet's speaking to, saying, "Hey, don't miss it. There is a light, and it's not you at this moment."
It's not you. I like that a lot.
Yeah,
I like that a lot. Well, and a phrase that has been sticking with me all throughout Advent was the moment we just draw a line in the sand of who's in and who's out. That is the moment we find ourselves on the opposite side of God.
Right.
And I think we see that with Israel here. They have made a stark line on who's in, who's out, so that they can protect their own safety, and have found themselves on the opposing side of God. And as you were saying, like, who doesn't miss it in the nativity? The light of the star is there, Christ is born, and we have all of these foreigners coming. Like the Magi are not Jewish at all. It's not Israel that's being drawn to this light. It is those on the outside of these starkly drawn boundaries.
Right.
You know,
right.
God's light will not be contained.
Yeah, the Magi and the shepherds, right? Because the shepherds are kind of they're the other side of the tracks kind of guys. You know, they're just out there. They're dirty and stinky and smelly, and which is interesting because that leads me to the thought in the epistle for this week. I think it's this week. I was reading it for this week in Ephesians, Ephesians 3, where Paul is talking about being essentially a missionary to the Gentiles. And, hey, that because of Christ, we're all part of this thing.
Right.
So Paul's even speaking to the gathering of the Magi, the people that are streaming to the light, if you will, from our Isaiah passage to the Nativity and the Advent season. All this comes together in Paul when Paul is saying, hey, all these people, the Gentiles, are a part of this thing as well because of Christ and his unifying spirit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that harkens back, and I'm sure you probably came across this in your preaching. It harkens back to what Isaiah said. I think it was early on in his book that it says, it's too small a task for you just to be a light to the Jews. You are to be a light to the Gentiles as well. This is the task that I'm calling you to through being a light to the nations.
Right.
And what an extraordinary picture there. So let's take a step then and talk about how we might preach this to our people. How do we make this passage accessible? And in that, I have to bring up what you put in your commentary about that beautiful image that you use about following the leader, that game that you would play as a kid when you'd go camping, where it wasn't played in daylight. It was played at night with the leader holding the only flashlight. Right. And how you played that was such a stark example of light and darkness. So is that something that you would use probably for your congregation?
Yeah, probably so. Because and Ben, I think you said it before we went live that you had a similar game. It sounded kind of like flashlight tag or whatever it was. I can't remember what you called it, but But yeah, so I think we can all kind of think back to those times where we've been at night in the dark. Most people have probably gone camping. If not, they've at least been outside in the dark, and they've at least experienced at some level their eyes adjusting to the light and the darkness. So interestingly, yeah, in that game, you had two choices. If you weren't up close, sometimes if it was with a youth group and you have, 15 to 20 people in a line through the woods, by the time you're the last person in line, it's pretty dark.
Yeah.
And so you can do one of two things. You can just forget about those in front of you and let your eyes adjust to the darkness. Or which still yet you stumble. Or you can listen to the instruction, because this is part of the game that I may have failed to enter in the text, in the article. And that is that the line is supposed to speak instruction all the way back to the end of the line. So if there's a big rock, then the person with the light says, "Hey, big rock.
Yeah.
Step left, step right," or whatever. And those instructions are supposed to make their way all the way back. So we can do one of two things. We could go it alone and let our eyes adjust to the dark and stumble around, or we can stay with the group and listen and grow in our awareness of, okay, what is it that they're telling me? What is it? Which way do I need to move? Left, right, up, down, branch in my face, whatever the instruction may be.
Right.
So yeah, I think that can help us get a picture for community.
Sure.
And what it is to be a part of a community that is gathering around the light of the world that showed up in humanity.
Well, I mean, you did add that portion in your commentary about the instructions, and as I was reading that,
I should have read it over.
the community aspect was just the first thing that popped into my mind, and really the contrast between the Nazarene Church in the Congo that I worked with, where they would gather together for 5 hours, and the power would go out all the time, but they were just so used to that because that's their culture. There's no consistency in anything except for the gathering of the people. The water goes out, the power goes out. There's no paved roads. A road may be there 1 month and maybe torn up the next based on the economic shift of their neighborhood. If a rich person moves in, man, that road can be all torn up to be made room for their great big house or whatever. Other people are living in shambles, So nothing is really consistent except for the gathering of the people, and it really put into perspective how we gather in North America, in the United States, for sure. Because we kind of see ourselves as this sort of seat of truth, as I talked about before, and we almost prefer doing things on our own rather than gathering and functioning as a community. So it's made the church a very odd thing. Well, I'm called to surrender my rights. What? I'm called to work together, because the pastor is not this perfect person. On the opposite side, actually, the pastor is probably one of the more wounded people and broken people of the congregation that is called to lead this people and direct them towards the light. They're the John the Baptist figure, pointing out towards the cross, right?
Right.
And so the pastor himself or herself is not the pinnacle of holiness and righteousness, but it is a call to participate in this light together, that we all need different parts to grow in maturity in righteousness. But we do these things so much on our own that the follow the leader turns into everybody wanting not only going out and doing the instructions themselves, but wanting their own flashlight. Everybody wants their own flashlight rather than hey, there's only one Jesus.
There's only one
Like, and
Yeah.
we got to gather around. God is concerned in Isaiah 60, all throughout Scripture, God is concerned about calling a holy people.
Right.
Not just holy individuals.
Right.
He's concerned about calling out a holy people because that is what changes culture.
Right.
And we're called to be a light to the world as the church, just like Israel is called here as well. And that is a big responsibility, and no one should have to have that burden placed upon their shoulders by themselves, right?
Right. It's crushing.
Yeah. Absolutely. And we don't even see Jesus going out on his own. I mean, the first thing he does is call people. He calls them to follow him and to do this work of God together.
Right. Yeah. If you look at, was it Luke 10, the sending of the 70, he even sends people out 2 by 2, as in togetherness. There's very few lone rangers. John the Baptist was a little bit of a lone ranger. And so there might be a few here and there, and maybe the prophet Isaiah, so there's elements of that. But those guys have a pretty rough go. Their life doesn't end real well.
Right. And even their mission, though, is to call the community.
Right.
Call those people together. And John the Baptist had disciples, and I'm sure
That's true.
Isaiah, even scholars will say that it's not the same Isaiah that writes all 3 books that are there.
That's true.
So it's this Isaiah community that has been brought together in this prophetic task. So, I think Moses is my favorite rogue individual in all of the scriptures because he's like, I don't want this.
Right.
What? Right. Can my brother come with me, please?
Exactly. I was going to say, God relents a little bit and tells him, okay, you can have Aaron. That's
you can fine. Take Aaron along with you.
Take Aaron. But remember, Aaron's going to be a Yehu. Just remember that. He's not going to be ideal for you.
Sure.
He was very helpful. He was very helpful, but he ended up being very destructive too. Yeah.
Well, and who started to, Moses' concern was that he wasn't a good speaker, but then who shoots off his mouth later on? It's Aaron when he asks for help. So yeah, that's wonderful. I love that imagery in your commentary there. Is that where you will be taking your congregation this Sunday?
Yeah. So right now, all through Advent, Advent's always leading us to a new thing, right? That this coming new king that is going to be born to us. He has already been born. We understand this, 2016 years ago, roughly, whatever. But still yet, he is coming. There's a new thing happening. So being new in Castle Rock, we've been here 4 months now already. I can't believe it's been that fast, but 4 months we've been here in Castle Rock. And so for Cherie and I, my wife, everything's new. Everything's new. For the congregation, it's not quite everything's new, but we are new to them. And so there's a lot of newness in our life and culture right now. So as we followed Advent, I kept pointing us to the newness of life, the newness of birth, the newness that Advent is speaking to in our lives. And so, yes, as we move into this new year, we're going to continue in this newness project. We're going to try to find, new ways to, whether it's a coat of paint in the foyer or whatever, but some new things that just kind of begin to speak to us about newness. So that being said, as we lean into the commentary, I might lean a little heavier on the Ephesians chapter, or the Ephesians passage for this week. But the idea is that as people gather to the light, they're gathering to the light in newness, in the reshaping. So, when you look at something in the dark and then you look at something in the light, it's almost as though it's new because it looks different.
Oh, that's so good.
There's a difference between seeing something in the daylight than seeing something in the night. For instance, when I was in high school, we were traveling from Northern California to Point Loma for a basketball tournament, and we stopped in this little town of Button Willow. Button Willow's out in the desert on the north side of going over the pass on I-5 to LA is the Grapevine. So we're out near Bakersfield kind of area, Button Willow, and we arrived at night, and I had no idea where we were until I woke up in the morning. Opened my hotel room, and it was all new. I mean, it was just desert. All I saw was jackrabbits and sagebrush. But it was a very new sight.
Oh, wow.
As I opened the door in, because at night I could see that there wasn't much out there, but I couldn't see what was or was not out there. But by morning, when I opened the door, the sun's shining, the lights on. Oh, wow, where are we? But the point of the story being, I saw something new in essence.
I love that.
It was a whole different world when the light was shining on it.
Yeah. Wow. It just reminded me of my last time at Stanley Lake in northern Idaho.
I love that place.
If you ever want to have a serene Google image search, just type in Stanley Lake. It's one of my favorite places on earth. And whenever I pull in at night, set up camp, like you said, it's just dark. All I see is the ground right in front of me, right? But then that sun rises, and not only, I love that, what you just said, Chris, like not only is it just seem new every time for me that the light comes in, but I am then reminded, it does two things. It looks new, but also I'm reminded of how small I am compared to that immensity.
Oh, yeah.
When the light is there, like when there's darkness, I'm the center of everything that's happening, right? I'm tunnel vision. I'm focused on where I need to go and what I need to do. Right. And that's my concern.
Yeah. You almost don't even want to know what's out there when it's dark.
Right.
I mean, there's critters.
Yeah, there's critters. You hear them and like, nope, just gonna ignore it. Like, I'm not gonna pay attention. But when Christ's light comes in, it's like the parent's flashlight under your bed after you were supposed to clean your room, right? Like, right. No, don't look under there. That's where I put all the mess, right? Don't look in the closet. The door's barely shut because that's where I put everything. Right. But the light shines on the goodness of the faithfulness and the sins of our lives. Right. And so in the light coming, it shows us the immensity, the newness, and the opportunity for newness where we've kept the old ways in our lives, where we've shoved those sins in the closet, under the bed, and invites us to repentance. It invites us to be a part of that newness. Because even though God will show the light of that immensity, that newness, and the ultimate profundity of that transformation, he still won't force us to be new, right? He invites us to surrender to that newness. And I really felt that in your commentary, that invitation is there in that light, to surrender to that instruction, surrender to that community, surrender to the light, the commands of God through that light, so that you too can be a light to the world. Right. Because it's not just going to happen. It calls for surrender. Yeah. That's incredible. Well, any final words for us today, Chris, on this passage and heading into Christmas tide in the future?
Well, the thing, I don't know if this turns a corner or not in the conversation, but I think what I have been learning so desperately is 4 months as an actual lead pastor. Though I was a lead pastor of Jacob's Well, we were a small church plant and congregation. It's a different shape. It's a different perspective. Yeah. It's a different lens in which to operate. And so So as a new guy here, all I can think is, man, I have got to lean in to this story of light so that I can lead well. There's a lot of projects and a lot of business, if you will, of the church for the pastor to get lost in.
Right.
But boy, if he doesn't stay close to the light, if he doesn't stay close to the words of the prophet, we can find ourselves in the weeds
really quickly.
Really quickly. And so, as a young green pastor, that's maybe my parting words, man. Stay close to the words of the prophet in deep and deeper and deeper ways, so that we can lead the church well. I told a guy not long ago, and I'll be careful with my language here. My language was maybe a little stronger with the other conversation, but all the business of the church can kind of just it can go away if we don't have this. If we don't have this with each other, if we don't have this with our Lord, then man, the business of the church can go to Button Willow.
It can go the way of Ahaz.
We can go the way of Ahaz, man. Well, yeah, man. Let's find connectedness. Man, we've got a great network of pastors here that I found. Every Thursday morning we meet together and have coffee and laugh and pray. A very simple time, but a very, very good time. So any pastors listening out there, I'd encourage you. There is community to be had in the words of the prophet, to gather around the light. Don't find yourself off by yourself. Hear the words of Isaiah.
We thank you so much, Chris, for giving of your time and especially in writing that commentary. For those of you who are watching, please don't neglect the commentaries for this week. Chris wrote an exceptional one on the passage that we just went over, Isaiah 60, 1-6. And we have other contributors such as Roger Hahn and some other exceptional commentaries. So go check those out. Follow us on Facebook. Subscribe to our YouTube page. Go to Instagram, Twitter, blah, 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 all those other social media stuff. And preach boldly. May the light show so vividly through your sermons this week. And thank you so much for your dedication to the community of Christ, wherever you serve. We are in this together. And may the light show so vividly through our work under the reign of God, who just shone so vividly through Jesus Christ. So preach boldly, be at peace, and may your congregations be at peace in hearing your words. Thanks again, Chris.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really good to have you, and we will see you on our next episode 48. Peace of Christ be with you all.